We are joined today by a very special guest. It's an interview that I've been looking forward to for a while. So I am very happy to introduce the former Marvel editor behind the Star Wars line when it was good, Deadpool, one of the co-creators of Gwenpool, the former senior editor director at Valiant, current group editor of licensing, and the top dog of Star Trek line at IDW. Thank you so much for joining us, Heather Antos, editor extraordinaire.
Oh my gosh, what an intro. Can we stop now? I feel like it's all downhill now.
Well, no way, because you're going to talk after me.
I know, that's the problem.
It's all up from here. It's all up. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's an early Saturday. We apologize. This is just the time that we decided to do this 6 years ago, and we've never changed it.
I love it. No, that's great. Thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be here and talk comics, which I like to think we all love.
Oh, yeah. You know, sometimes I wonder about that, but in general, that's the idea around here. And there are already people saying hello and welcome to you in our live chat. So if you guys do decide you have questions for Heather, that's great. But A, make them respectful as you always do. And B, we'll save them until later on. Before we get into the nitty gritty with Heather, and we're going to talk everything you can imagine, Star Wars, Deadpool, Star Trek, we're going to get to everything. Before we do that, I do just want to quickly say, of course, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/thecomicspals is the absolute best way to do that. You get a lot of bang for your buck, which you know we love to give. You get a weekly newsletter. You get the exclusive show, Palling Around. You get to vote in the book club poll. And you get a nickname and a shout out on this very show. So I want to say a special shout out to the best pals in the universe, Thunderstruck, Rebecca Alejandro, the Hound of Justice, Atomic Hound, and the Red Spiral. And of course, a very special thanks to the Night Stalker, Harris Dajinski, Brian Demolisher Del Pozo, Kefis the Incorruptible, Momentum Mike Elliott, Starcross Catherine Stars, Dan the Truth Trudeau, Joel Justice, Jalen the Sanguine Sorcerer, Neon Knight Cosmic Avenger, Super Shenran the Conqueror, and Marvelous Mike and Mackenzie. Thank you all so much. We love you. That list is getting very long.
Yeah, so many.
Yeah. Yes, these are people who are crazy enough to support us on Patreon. So I'm crazy enough to read that every week.
I was gonna say you're gonna regret this one day when you have 1 million subscribers. It's just gonna be a podcast that's just the list. It's gonna be like the what is it? The side effects at the end of like a Pepto-Bismol.
Oh my god!
Oh, you got it.
All the warnings.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right about that, and I didn't think about that when we first offered that on Patreon. So
that's cool. He's got to learn how to talk really fast. So
if you want to hear him run through everything as fast as possible, please support them on Patreon because I do. So
thank you. That is a ringing endorsement. Also, if you want to catch this show live, that is YouTube every single Saturday at 10:15 a.m. Eastern, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern for Pals Pulls, our comics review show. And of course, join our Discord where we have the best community in comics. We're always having fun conversations. All right, enough of the spiel. So, Heather, I have been looking forward to speaking with you for a while. Editors are hard to come by for interviews, especially the ones who, in my opinion, have been at the highest of highs, as you have. And so I feel like you'll be able to bring a lot of nuance to several conversations that we have here on the show all the time. And I'm very excited for that. And I want to start with a question. Well, more like a clarification.
Okay.
Because I feel like people seem to think in two extremes when it comes to editors.
Yeah.
One is that you guys are just cogs in the machine that are there to check for spelling errors and make sure that the artists draw Storm right. Or you're tyrannical monsters who withhold pay and dictate stories and gatekeep creators from getting their work. So what is the role of an editor in comics?
Yeah, so there's a first just to do a quick sum up of quick answer, the TLDR. Accounting, editorial, and proofreading are 3 different departments. And I trust me, I have no interest in accounting. Or proofreading. No, but editors, yeah. So the closest clarification, I think the closest description of what an editor's job is like a showrunner for TV or film, a producer. We source ideas, we source talent, we look for talent, we cast projects, we oversee budgets, we oversee marketing, we oversee schedules and timelines and studio needs, publisher needs, the macro picture of it all, get people to do what it is they say they're going to do to the very best of their abilities when they say they're going to do it, for 20 to 30 projects at a time. It's chaos every single day. And I think that's why I love it, is because no 2 days are the same, no 2 projects are the same. I've worked with some creators my entire career on a multitude of different books, and every single project is different. It doesn't matter, that it's the same people. And I think that's what makes it so creatively fulfilling and fun, is that every day is a different adventure.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's professional people wrangling, it sounds like.
It is. You're a part-time zookeeper, part-time therapist, I think. Full-time story director. But it's there's a lot of therapy calls.
How many late night calls did you spend with, I don't know, Charles Soule? He's got no problems. That man seems like he's very well put together.
Charles is great. Charles is great. No, there was one time, I love you, Charles, but there is one time where, he owed me a pitch, and I ended up calling him, and he was like, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "You need to write this down." And he literally pitched me over the phone, and I'm like having to write down his pitch so I can send it off to the licenser, just because schedules are crazy, especially when you're Charles Soule and writing 27 million different projects at a time. But yeah, no, I mean, I've had the 3 a.m. call. I've had the, there's some. I view my philosophy, my job is to give the creators the best environment that they need in order to succeed, and within reason, of course. So there's no one right way to edit or create. Everyone has their own different ways in which they like to work. But, I do, coming up at Marvel, I did notice there would be a lot of editors there that this is the way I make a book, and you, creator, have to fit within the way I work. And that's okay. That's totally fine, especially if great books come out of that. I tend to work in almost an opposite way, where, if I'm working with you, Marco, and you are terrified of your email and you never want to look at your email ever in your life.
No, thank you.
And you prefer texting or phone calls, or some creators I can only get a hold of via Instagram DM. Great. That's how we're going to talk, that's fine. That is the best way that you work. Or, there are some artists that do really loose layouts and then final pages. They don't, they don't draw page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll do, a panel here, a panel there, a panel there. That's great. If that's what gets you to turn your work in on time and it's good, awesome. Power to you. Let's figure that out. My job is to, provide the best environment for you to do your best work, and I will handle all the other bullshit.
When I think, editor, everyone thinks, oh, it's the guy who's helping you edit your crappy screenplay in college. When really it sounds like it's more of a project managerial sort of thing.
It's like a creative project manager. Yeah. There are some creators that are just have such a strong creative vision, and they want less of a creative input on things, and they do good work. So they don't need, they don't need a story therapist, as it were. And they just want you to yell at them when to turn things in. Great. Awesome. Happy to do that. If you hit your deadlines and your shit's good, those are my favorite jobs. Right. There's not as much to do. But there are, there are people that do want that collaboration and that creative feedback, and most people need it. Most people can't, they're so in the work that they can't see outside of it. Especially when starting out, right? A lot of creators that are less experienced, or artists that are looking to write for the first time versus just draw, it's writing a script for an issue 1 is very different than writing a script for an issue 2, which is very different than writing a final issue. Like how do you make something feel episodic and get me, the reader, to want to pick up? Everyone's going to pick up number 1. That's easy. How do I get them to pick up issue 2? Right? How do I get them to pick up issue 2? How do I get them to pick up issue 3?
Oh yeah.
I often say issue 2s might be the hardest issue to write, because everyone's going to pick up a number 1, right? And if you have a good enough twist, a good enough cliffhanger at number 1, they'll pick up issue 2. But then to get someone to pick up issue 3 is really hard. And issue 3s are normally 2 where you see your order drop-offs on the retailer, because by then they'll have sell-through on issue 1. And so, yeah, getting someone to want to like stick with a series at issue 3 and on, is really, is hard. It's a challenge, and yeah.
As an editor, do you have strategies that you employ when you're working with writers and creative teams on that second and third issue? Do you have strategies where you go, okay, these are some of the ideas I have based on experience that will help this along the way?
So I don't necessarily have like cookie cutters of, well, in issue 1s you do X, Y, and Z, and in issue 2s you do. That's not how I work. I'm sure some people do, and that works for them, and that's great. But in general, the way I use a lot of metaphors in my notes, and there's a promise and then a reward, right? And I always, like with number 1s in particular, I'll say, like, when you're marketing something, there's a there's a new Batman in town, right? And like that's the hook, right? Who is this new Batman? I want to pick up this book, and I read the book, and correct, at the end it's new Batman. Awesome. This book gave me exactly what I ordered. I am satisfied. I can't be upset with that, because it's exactly what I was told I was going to get, but there's nothing extra, right? There's no reward for that promise being fulfilled.
Right.
And so, for number 1s, I always say, like, by page 12, 13, if it's a normal 2022 page, by page 12, 13, we have the promise. The promise is fulfilled. But then our cliffhanger, the reward for sticking through the promise, has to be something that no one saw coming, that no one, that's what's going to get us to pick up the next one. And then we get into what the story is really about. And not necessarily like a bait and switch or anything like that, but it's the, it's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
There is a new Batman, but
Right.
The new Batman is Two-Face. And in issue 2, now you're going to see why and how.
Right. Exactly. Like that, that could be a good example. And so, but the big thing for me is, there's a lot of people, writers, editors, even, who, comics is a very fast-paced industry, especially monthly, right, to churn out every month. And so time very much is a luxury. And so a lot of times people skimp on outlines just to get to the script stage, and we'll figure out the story when it's getting scripted. But then you run into a lot of problems that haven't been resolved, and you're doing things that are not earned. It's the what wouldn't it be cool if, right? You're right, it would be cool, but why are we doing it? If we're just doing something for the fact that it's cool, like, then all that is a moment that might make a cool splash page, but it's not going to leave an impact on anyone. It's not going to, I'm not going to relate to it. I'm not going to have a visceral reaction to it. I'm not going to care. And so I tend to put my writers through hell in the outline stage, where we are going to figure out every single plot point, every single issue, every single, moment, character beat, and make sure all of that is locked and makes sense, and the ending is earned. That way, when you get to the script, we know what's going to happen. Writing the script is going to be the easiest part. At that point, it's just figuring out dialogue and pacing and page turns. We don't have to solve major story problems. Because the last thing I ever want a writer to do is like, well, I just wrote 30 pages and now you have to scrap the whole thing, because none of it works.
so essentially like a zero session for in D&D terms, in a way. Like kind of getting that down with I guess a DM in this point. I'm playing too much Baldur's Gate, sorry. It's in the brain.
Well, like for instance, Crashing by Matthew Klein Morgan being one of the first IDW originals I did. I think we went through the outline like 7 or 9 times. Like we did 7 or 9 different like drafts of that outline, so that by the time we got to issue 1, there was like we went through, and Matthew's a newer writer, so he did need a little more massaging, but like I think we only did like 3 drafts of issue 1, and by the time we got to issue 4, the final issue, it was like 2 drafts, but the more work you do ahead of time, right, the easier the results are gonna be.
You get those payoffs, the actual results of like you have the foresight to be able to plan out. You can move things. It becomes more like, I guess, like mechanical, right? You can move pieces in and around. You can well,
that's where the art comes in. That's where the creativity and the flow, like we know what's going to happen, now we just get to tell how it happens. And have fun with that, because all the structure has been done,
that clarity. Going through your site, you have a series on like parts 1 through 5, everything you need to know about editors, off of Ha, and one of those, you have a few pieces, and number 4 in particular is about like being clear on goals, being specific about where you're trying to get to from what point to like point A to point B. Do those, I guess, when beyond not having the foresight, do those parts kind of get mucked up? Like, is there, even after you've plotted it out, is there a scenario where you start to write out the story and go, actually, wait, some of these things didn't work? 100%. And like, what is that reset?
Yeah, 100%. That happens sometimes where, it's Google Maps, right? You have your road map, you have the fastest route, and then all of a sudden there's an accident and you have to reroute. That's okay. We can still get to our final destination. It's just going to take a little bit of creativity, maybe a little bit longer, right? We might have to take the scenic route to get there, but we're still going to get to our final destination. That's something that happens all the time. Clarity of goals is a big thing for me as an editor. My job as an editor is not to like, you know what, Sean, I'm going to tell you what your story needs to be.
Right.
I know that you think it's about this, but I want it to be about that. This isn't about me. I don't hire Sean. I don't hire Marco. I don't hire Tyler because I want them to tell my story. I hire you guys because I want to work with you and I want your stories. Obviously there's a little more nuance with that when it comes to licensing, because at the end of the day, we are beholden to the licensor. But it's so important for me as an editor to understand your goals with your characters and your story so that I can do the best Google Maps rerouting to make sure that we're achieving those goals in the best way and most, efficient way as possible. Because, 20 pages might feel like a lot. It's not a lot of space to tell a story. It's not a lot of space to tell a story, especially if you have like a very large cast, right? You never want anything to feel ancillary. You never want anything to feel superfluous. Everything needs to be intentional. And I think that's a big part of my editorial process is Declan Shelby, whom I've worked with a ton. He said it really well when someone was asking about working with an editor, and he was like, that I make him justify his choices. It's the, even if he doesn't have an answer, right, for why he chose to write a certain scene or have a character do a certain thing, he just did it because wouldn't it be cool if, right? But then me asking that question or that note, or why is this happening? Like, what is your intention with this? He has to then go back and justify it. And, sometimes he's like, no, I do want this to happen because of reasons X, Y, and Z. Or other times he looks at it and he's like, you're right, I don't know why why that's there. That doesn't make sense. So, and that's, I'm not there to like change anything, but I just want to make sure it's clear and intentional, so that anyone picking up can follow and understand and appreciate the work that's on the page.
Feels like in that scenario you're kind of like a mirror. You're like asking them to reflect back on the things that they've written so that they can think about it again or just in a new way.
Yeah a lot of times.
So I imagine that it's got to be pretty different when you're editing at Marvel or DC versus a Valiant or an IDW, especially now for you at IDW, considering your position and sort of what you get to do. You have a lot more agency, but what are the differences between, editing at Marvel, and being in that position, and then also now being in your position at IDW with all the experience you have and everything else?
Yeah. Experience definitely adds a lot, experience and confidence. I think, and just, wisdom, and I think the way to Marvel treats its staff is not as great as some other publishers. You're there to fulfill, Marvel, and it's kind of like, I always say, I love the people there. I love the characters in the world, but it is a different corporate grind of, creativity, which is not the way I want to create. But it was very much have you guys ever seen Devil Wears Prada? And Stanley Tucci's character is always like, well, a million girls would kill to have your job. That's very much how it felt every single day. Very much, we'll deal with it because you're one of the lucky ones.
One of the lucky ones working for a non-living wage in New York City.
Yep, you're one of the lucky ones. It's working for IP, whether it is Marvel or IDW or Boom or Valiant or whatever, like you still have to serve the IP at the end of the day in the best interests of the IP. Who gets to determine what the best interests are, or goals of the IP are very different. At Marvel, it's now Disney. And their best, and look, at the end of the day, we're a capitalist society, so the best interests for the IP are always going to be money. What's going to sell the most, sell the best. So that can vary, but my goals as an editor are always what is best for the character, what is best for the story, what is best. Your goals are to tell a Deadpool story that fits inside this event that we're doing. Great, that's my job. It's the sales team to figure out how to sell it. That's not my problem. But Tom Brevoort actually at Marvel had a very good kind of roadmap to how to have a quote unquote successful book. And you need at least 2 out of 3 things. They're the 3 C's. They're character, concept, and creator. If you have Brian Michael Bendis on a Spider-Man book, that's going to sell. Even if it's the most generic, Spider-Man's watching paint dry, I'm still going to pick it up because I want to, what is Bendis going to write about Spider-Man watching paint dry, right? You know, if it is Joe Schmo writing Batman, you know, that's it. If it's Batman, you don't need anything else. That'll just sell in and of itself. But Joe Schmo writing Batman, you know, and it's Batman and dinosaurs, right? That's a cool concept. I don't need to know who Joe Schmo is. I kind of want to see what's up with that, right? But if you have a creator-owned book, you know, no name character, but it's Brian K. Vaughan, and it's Game of Thrones in space, right? Well, that's cool. I want to check out what that's about, right? And so, so you know, it's the, do you want it good? Do you want it fast? Do you want it right? Do you want it cheap? Right? It's kind of like that same, you know, you need at least 2 of the 3 in order to like discuss moving forward with the project. And you know, that's the same as whether you're at Marvel, whether you're self-publishing, whether, you know, whether you're whatever, to get the attention of, you know, consumers, you need to have, you know, at least 1, hopefully 2.
Yeah.
If you have all 3, that's awesome. You're pretty set. But yeah.
So Bendis on Batman with dinosaurs.
I mean, I read it.
That's it.
Those dinosaurs are going to talk a lot.
They're going to interrupt each other. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of snappy chatting.
I think that was the Walmart book, honestly. So,
so, IDW, they brought you on board to sort of, you know, work with the licensed IP. And since then, you know, Star Trek, you guys have done an awesome job with the sort of like renaissance of Star Trek, and how cool that's been. And so what's the process been like for you of reviving Star Trek and really bringing it to form? And then also, I think this is true, launching the first ever Star Trek event in comics.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It was, when I got handed Star Trek, it was very, very intimidating. So to backtrack, when I was hired at IDW, I was hired originally to oversee the all ages Star Wars and Marvel books, which is kind of hilarious to me because my whole career went full circle in that moment. To go from working at Marvel on Star Wars to now at IDW working with Marvel and Star Wars. But we didn't renew that contract, that license. So Star Wars and Marvel were no longer with IDW. They went to, or Star Wars went to Dark Horse. And I think the all ages Marvel just kind of ceased to exist entirely. But my bosses came to me because there were some other editorial shifts happening at the time. They asked, you know, what of our licenses would you be interested in? You know, they had G.I. Joe at the time, Transformers, Sonic, Ponies, Star Trek, Turtles, and some other stuff in development. And you know, I didn't grow up watching Turtles. I'm not a Ponies person. You know, the license that I was most familiar with was Star Trek. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be funny, going from Star Wars for most of my career to that other Star franchise, right? And there was something really interesting about Star Trek to me, not just because I'm a fan of the franchise, but also, you know, fandom as we know it today would not exist without Star Trek. Point blank, period. You know, in 2 years is the 60th anniversary of Star Trek as a franchise. Star Trek fans did the first fan conventions ever. That was Star Trek fans. So Comic-Con, you know, wouldn't exist without Star Trek fans. And, you know, the MCU, this multi-universe, right? Multiverse, all these films, the TV shows, all that wouldn't exist unless Star Trek had done it first. And, but for some reason, the comics just kind of existed. You know, Star Trek fans were reading them, but comics fans weren't reading them. And one of the things that I loved about working on the Star Wars comics and getting to launch that line at Marvel was, you know, it wasn't just Star Wars fans, like comics fans were reading those comics. And they felt big and they felt important and like they mattered, and they really made a statement on what Star Wars storytelling could be in a modern era. And I wanted to try and see if we could do, kind of bring some of that energy to Star Wars or to Star Trek. Because, I was looking at like the last several years of the line, and not that anything that came before was bad necessarily, but it was just a bunch of mini series that existed in a vacuum. Oh, here's this Mirror War story, or here's this random Kelvin story, or here's this tie-in with the TV show, but they never interacted with one another. They never acknowledged the universe as a whole, in a way that any other large DC, Marvel, Star Wars IP does. And they never quote unquote mattered, and as we know, as a fan, when I have only a limited amount of money to spend at the comic shop every single week, I don't want to read a story that just is a lost episode. I want to read something that feels big, that feels important, that feels like it matters. And so we were coming up on the 400th issue of Star Trek Comics with IDW, and I thought, you know what, this makes a really great place to kick off a new era of Star Trek Comics. And I went to two writers who have been on the rise for a long time, whom I love dearly and have worked together a ton and are the biggest Star Trek fans I know, Jackson Lanzig and Colin Kelly. And I asked them, what does a book that's just called Star Trek look like? Who are the adventures of Star Trek? What's a story that we can only tell in the comics? How do we get characters together that are never going to appear together on screen, or that can't appear together on screen? What's a story that feels big and like it matters? And that's how we brought Cisco back, from the Jordan wormhole. We get Scotty, we have Spock, we have Data, we have all these characters, everyone's favorites, all in one go. And the goal from the beginning was always to bring in Defiant. The goal from the beginning was always to do Day of Blood. It was always to, expand the universe and show how Star Trek can feel bigger than just a lost episode book. And every single book, I think, the creators have done such a good job. They stand on their own. They have their own identity. They have their own voice. But if you're reading everything, like, they do acknowledge the universe as a whole in a way that the books just haven't done in a long time. Like, for instance, if you read our Deep Space Nine, the Dog of War miniseries that Mike Chen and Angel Hernandez did, Quark gets a corgi named Latinum in it, as Quark is wont to do. And in arc 2 of Star Trek, where Cisco and the crew go back to Deep Space Nine, years later, years after our Deep Space Nine book takes place, there you'll see little Latinum just running around in the background. And if you hadn't read the other miniseries, cool, there's a dog on the ship, who cares? But but if you're reading everything, right, it's a cohesive, you see them acknowledge each other. There's a fun little nod I'm very excited about coming up next month in our Day of Blood event, where honestly the resolution for Day of Blood can't have happened unless a certain event took place in our TOS Echoes book. That comes out. But again, you don't need to read all of it to get it and understand it. But it's a nice little nod to what characters are also showing up in the Echoes book that do show up, in Defiant and Star Trek, and therefore have memories of something that happened, all those years ago. Just little things to show that, these books and these stories are bigger than just, the individual pages that they fall on.
Well, first, I'm glad you mentioned Day of Blood, because it's a 5-part crossover. We got the Day of Blood #1 back in July. 2 books are out now in August: Star Trek Defiant #6 and Star Trek 11, I think, is coming out, and then in September we're getting Star Trek Defiant #1 and Star Trek #12. So it's a compact event. If you guys want to check it out, I've been reading. I think it's been a lot of fun, and one of the things that I like about it so much, and this I think speaks to the talents that you've developed and grown in this kind of role, is that this feels like what events are supposed to feel like.
Yeah.
There's preamble, there's a prelude to it that you can read or not read. If you read it, then when you get to the event, it feels like you've been building towards something and you're excited. And if you haven't, hey, it's an event and that stuff's there if you want it. But if you don't, you can read this and you're absolutely fine. And that's what I always thought events were supposed to be. And I just love that. And I felt right at home.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's been, I drive my writers crazy with it, I think, sometimes, because I'm very big on, like, Day of Blood has a big old #1 on it. It has a big old #1 on it. And we're talking, it's a big thing. So, if someone hasn't read Defiant 1 through 5, if someone hasn't read Star Trek 1 through 10, like, they need to be able to pick this book up and, like, follow it. They don't have to understand every little nuance or every little quip or every little whatever, but they need to be able to get like, oh, this is a big deal. And if our characters don't stop call us, like, bad shit's going to happen. Like, they, they need to be able to understand. I mean, it's a thing. I'm talking with writers about, like, a follow-up story that will come out after a couple months after the event. And I'm driving them crazy right now because they're so referential to some moments that happened in the event. And I'm like, guys, like, is this going to make sense to anyone if they haven't thought about this event in 6 months, or 2, if they didn't read it in the first place? Like, this still has to, it's the promise and reward again, right? Like, and if I am expected, and we've all heard it, if I'm expected to have done homework before enjoying this story, then I don't want to read it. That's too much effort. I want to be able to, and I think that's kind of like, the fatigue we're all getting with the MCU right now. I shouldn't have to watch 5 television shows to understand a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And comics shouldn't be like that, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of extra effort, but I think the results speak for themselves.
I think it also makes them reliant on themselves, where you can't then have the book stand on its own. You can't drive a singular narrative within each contained story because they're so tied together. And then that feels like, to your point, work. I have to do that homework. I have to make sure I'm studying up on this one to make sure that I know the right answer for this.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, it's one of my least favorite that I like, it drives me crazy because I'll give a no and just be like, just give us a little context. I'm not asking, I don't need to spend 3 pages on something. 1 sentence. I just need 1 sentence,
A little editor box, that's all.
And not even that, just, I often reference sitcom writing because I think sitcom, writing, or just any residual television show from, the 90s, 80s, 90s, when you couldn't binge watch anything.
Right.
I always reference these where, and not to date myself, but back when live television and commercials were the only way that people watch things, but people would channel hop through commercials, right? And you would flip. Oh, I don't want to watch this commercial, so I'm going to see what else is on elsewhere and then go back. If you watch any television show and just pay attention to the dialogue, any new scene, any comeback from commercial, any new change of location, they will name the characters. They will give a quick little, this is the status quo, this is the problem, and just a one quick sentence. I reference Friends a lot because that's the show I watch all the time, but just, like, hey, Joey, why are you sitting in Chandler's chair? That's all my clothes, right? It just has right away, I know these characters, I know the relationships, I know the problem in 1 sentence. And, and do people normally talk like that? No, people don't normally talk like that. But it gives us the information, when I'm watching something, I'm not like, oh, wow, that's not how I talk to my friends. I'm just enjoying the moment and getting the context for the scene. And yeah, when an editor is asking for context or clarity, they're not like, write me an essay, you know. Just give a sentence. It's one sentence. It's not hard. Y'all like to put dialogue balloons. Like, what's one more?
Right. Or in some cases, probably less.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, all the time I will do like, can we get some context as to like why this is important? And the licensors or sometimes the writers will be like, well, people who've been reading the book will know. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the first issue of a new arc, so let's pretend that we're getting new readers. Like,
Right.
let's hypothetically.
That's so funny. Like, you would think that, especially because of Star Trek being, at least to my understanding, like traditionally, like episodes, there's continuity and there's certainly a through line, but you can watch most episodes of Star Trek and you'll be fine.
Yep.
So you would think that they would get the importance of something like that. But...
Oh, and they do. But it's the issue, like, when you're so into the war story, you forget that, you know everything. Especially like for fandoms like Star Trek, that you have the diehard nerds who know everything. And can like reference specific scenes from specific episodes 40 years ago, right? And like I like Star Trek. I am not that nerd. I'm not that nerd that I was at San Diego Comic-Con on one of the Star Trek panels, and they were doing like a trivia, and if you answer the question you get like whatever prize, and some of it was like, what's the name of the episode where this random like tidbit happens, and people knew it, and I'm just like, I don't think I love anything that much. Like I know a lot. I have a lot of weird random nerd trivia up in this brain, but I don't think I'm ever at the point where I'm like, I can tell you exactly the episode title.
The episode title, the opening line.
Yep.
The amount of discussions I see online based on the amount of pips on a collar of a Star Trek character. It's like,
oh my god.
Oh no, that I can do. That's do not get me started on rank badges.
Oh yeah, it's a big deal.
I can only do this for Buffy. We get past Buffy, I'm out. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I got you on names of episodes. After that. So I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Heard of it.
Because cursory knowledge, a little bit of familiarity.
Yep.
There are 2 points in my life where I love Star Wars most. The first one is when I discovered Knights of the Old Republic, the video game. Amazing game, my favorite game. But the second is the initial era of Star Wars comics. That launch and those first few years were phenomenal. Tyler right now has on the screen Dr. Aphra. Dr. Aphra's my favorite Star Wars character. Oh. I love Dr. Aphra so much. So I wanted to talk to you about what that time period was like and just the energy. I got to imagine the energy of being able to be a part of the team that brought Star Wars back in comics at Marvel must have been really cool.
It was insane. Like, I had done like self-publishing before Marvel, and like that's kind of how I broke in. And when I was asked if I wanted to interview for an editorial position, it was like right after they announced they were getting Star Wars, like literally like the month or so after. And I had no idea what I was interviewing for. And at the time, like, I will be the first to admit, I was not reading Marvel comics. Like, I read Deadpool and that was about it. I was definitely more of a DC girl at the time.
Oh wow.
And I, nothing against Marvel. It was just, I, like a lot of people to comics, I was just like, I have no idea where to start. I have no idea what Spider-Man issue to pick up or whatever. And but I love Deadpool, so all I read was Deadpool. And so during interviewing, I remember going to a comic shop and talking to my boyfriend at the time, being like, I guess I should buy a Marvel comic. I guess I should. But I was a huge Star Wars nerd, like huge. I had been playing a tabletop Star Wars RPG for 6 years at that point, like an ongoing, very. Yeah. And but I had no idea that I was interviewing to be the on the Star Wars team. So when I found that out, and they're just like, great, your first professional, job with a publisher. You're working on the biggest franchise of all time with Jason Aaron, John Cassaday, Mark Waid, Terry Dodson, right? Like all of these powerhouses, just insane, and I think my first day at the office, they're like, great, you're going to deliver script notes to Mark Waid today. Which like Mark and I are buddies now, but like then like little 24-year-old me, I was just like, what you want?
What? Who? You said that and I got sweaty. Like
right,
what?
and also like I had to write, one of my jobs was writing the recap pages, which for those initial Star Wars books were the opening crawls, right? And like, what is one of the most like mood defining moments of a Star Wars movie? It's that opening crawl. It's that, I'm getting chills just thinking about it, right? You're in the theater and you hear the 20th Century Fox and then the, the theme and the crawl goes down. That's it. You're setting the tone. And I remember like, it's 3 paragraphs. It's just 3 paragraphs on a page. And I think it took me like 8 hours to write my first one. And I was so nervous and so like paranoid, and I sent it to Lucasfilm because they had to prove everything. And it came back no notes, and I was like, oh, okay, wow. I'm not fired. Like, but no, I mean, it was a very exciting time, but it was a very stressful time. Working on IP with a partner is difficult, especially when it's that level of building trust with your external partners, and especially when the processes hadn't been figured out yet. And that was that those first couple of years, I'm so proud of all the work that we've done, but it was difficult at times because it's that balance of when the movies are happening, right? Well, movie people don't want us touching anything that has anything to do with their films, right? There was a period very early on where they were like, oh, well, you can't do anything with Han, Luke, or Leia. And it's just like, but who can we tell stories on? And
what is
like,
Star Wars?
Well, but how about Admiral Akbar? Like these are very real conversations. And I often talked about it because my whole career I've done licensed, IP with external partners, and I do it very well. And a lot of that is my like, it's a negotiation, it's a compromise, it's a relationship. My job is to create the very best Star Wars, now Star Trek, right, comic that I can. That is my job. Their job is to tell me no. Their job is to protect the brand, protect the IP. And a lot of times that is, well, that's not safe. That's too risky. We don't know how people will respond to that. So we'd rather just not do it.
Right.
I think there's a time, especially with Star Wars, I would notice that people's fandoms is so big that I can't say no to Lucasfilm. They just have to, I just have to accept what they say. And I'm not that person. They'll be like, well, you can't do this for reasons. They'll be like, that's cute. We're going to figure out another way to do it though. So yeah. And I learned a lot. I learned so much working on those books, and with writers like Kieran and Mark and Jason, who are just brilliant at their craft, and the way they would problem solve some of the like stupid notes that we would get, and make the next version even better than the original. Is just, it was truly an honor, and I learned so much from getting to do that.
Working on the Star Wars books, was the idea of these characters becoming live action like on the table? Like Black Chrysanthemum finally shows up in Book of Boba Fett, which is awesome. Yeah. I popped real hard when I saw that.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I
cried, man. I cried when that happened. which is so funny because anyone on the internet knows like I'm not Boba Fett's biggest fan. And so I think what was episode 3 or something where he appeared, and I like tweeted, I was just like cheered up today during today's episode of Book of Boba Fett. And someone responded, they're just like, oh man, me too. That moment when like XYZ happened, and I'm like, you and I are watching a very different episode. But
That's
I mean,
awesome.
anything is possible, you know, like they own these characters. We don't own these characters. So anything is possible. You know, we would get hints here and there that people were like poking and prodding and seeing what's available when we would get asked to, you know, can you send in reference shots of, you know, X, Y, and Z? The animation team is asking about this character. Like, you know, can you fill out these character profiles or answer these questions, you know, whatever, stuff like that. So it's still like, oh, someone's curious, you know, but seeing characters like some of the Inquisitors show up, you know, in like the video games, or you know, Black Chrysanthemum, or some of the other stuff here and there. It's really cool to see the reception to some of this stuff, and to know that, like, you know, I had the teensiest, the smallest little bit of effort behind it in some way is just, it's, you know, they're my babies, and it's just so cool to see the response, because you never know, right? You never know how people are going to respond to any of this stuff. And so to see the reception, especially with Star Wars, because man, Star Wars fans hate Star Wars, let me tell you.
You're not kidding.
Yep.
You're not kidding.
Yep.
So to be a part of something that people liked, Star Wars, it's really nice.
Yeah.
And like you did it, and it was good, and that whole initial crop of creators did such a great job, and then y'all bounced. And so any negative critique of the Star Wars comics now is like, yeah, that's not my era. We had our era.
Yeah.
We had our run.
It is, you know, and look, creative choices are made for reasons, you know. I can't get into that, but it is a nice point of pride where when I'm at shows and creators who worked on Star Wars, or fans, you know, they'll come up to me and they'll just be like, I miss you on Star Wars. And it just like, oh, you noticed. It's just, thank you. I worked very hard.
So I want to say once again, the Star Trek Day of Blood crossover series, the first Star Trek event is currently happening now. This is like IDW's big summer Star Trek event. It's not.
If you read Star Wars and you read Vader Down, this is our Vader Down.
Vader Down was phenomenal.
This is literally our Vader Down. Vader Down was the inspiration behind. I mean, the story is different, but like, you know, building Star Wars and Darth Vader to Vader Down is what Star Trek Defiant to Day of Blood is. So if you liked those books, like, definitely pick these up, because it's for the same fans.
The DNA is definitely very evident. And like I said, it's just a 5-part crossover. So if you're a Star Trek fan, if you're a good comics fan, go out and pick it up. We've got a few more minutes, but there's I want to touch on something. You know, unfortunately, the comics industry has been going through a lot lately. And we had, you know, the unfortunate, terrible death of Ian McGinty, and the conversation that all sparked. And you've been critical. You were one of the people who was tweeting about comics and your experience, particularly at Marvel. And you talked about, you know, some of the low pay issues and maybe like a toxic environment. Can you speak to where that culture sort of comes from and why it's so pervasive, particularly there, and just kind of, you know, your thoughts on where we're at this moment in comics?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's obviously a very complex, complicated, nuanced conversation where there's just no one singular solution. You know, I think, and it's not, and I think the thing, I was actually talking about this with a writer who still does comics, but they have a full-time gig in marketing. And he was like, it's not just comics, it's everywhere. I think it's just capitalism. And I think like that's the thing at the end of the day is late stage capitalism sucks. But yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people don't realize, and it's not an excuse, but that a lot of comics companies, several comics companies started with 4 guys in a basement.
Right.
It's not anyone with a business background to, I want to make a business where we publish comics. That's not, how most of these companies started. A lot of it is, I want to make comics, so I'm going to just start publishing comics and buy an LLC and, do it that way. And then it grows. And then shit, I have to figure out how to run a business. That's why you get a lot of these companies without HR teams, without an actual legal department, without an actual, because they don't know, or it just, it's just not top of mind as a necessity. When I was one of the other companies I've worked for, our accounting and legal and HR was all one person.
What?
Yes, one person. And so yes, but I think like that is something that a lot of people don't understand. Again, not an excuse, but just the reality. And a lot of people think that like, oh, if you work for a publisher, like you're rolling in dough. That's not the case, like when I was at Marvel, they paid us less than 30 grand a year.
That's fucked.
Yeah. When
this is
I was
New York.
In New York City, so you want it gets better. So 2015, I'm at Marvel. I'm with Jordan White, and we are doing all the Star Wars books and all the Deadpool books. That was our office. We're doing those books. I think it was Dan Slott did the math, and he calculated that in 2015, the highest selling publishers, the best publishers, was Marvel, Jordan and I, in DC.
That's crazy.
So Jordan and I, just our office, our small little Star Wars and Deadpool comics, did better than all of DC. And getting paid less than 30 grand a year. So that's just because they can, because a million girls will kill for your job, right? It's that mentality. And all creative industries, it's not just comics, it's Hollywood, it's modeling, it's a lot of creative industries really prey on that passion, and they prey on that toxicity of these people will put up with absolute shit in order to work on the IP that they love, and in order to do the thing that they love. And so that's why I always tell creators, like, you are your business. I, Heather Antos, in my own business, yes, I work for IDW, but I am Heather Antos, and I run the business that is Heather Antos. And so I have to look out for me, because no one else is going to, and it's on me to negotiate that. And because no corporation is going to be looking out for your best interests.
You got that right.
And these creators will be like, well, they're offering shitty contracts, and like, you can say no, and that's not to put the sole onus on the creators. These companies shouldn't be offering shitty terms, but you also can say no to them. You can negotiate. And that's the thing too, is a lot of people don't realize like they have agency and they have autonomy. And it's scary. It's so scary to say no to when you finally have an offer. But it's important to say no.
Right.
Know your worth, own your worth. I think it was a very eye-opening moment for me when I was leaving Marvel. I knew after a year of working there that this was not the best creative environment for me. As I said before, that corporate, we're just doing this just to make budgets is just not, I don't think anyone does their best work in those environments. And so I knew Marvel wasn't forever, but it was all about like, what is the right fit? And when I did leave, I was talking, giving my 2 weeks notice and talking to other colleagues there. Someone said to me, Heather, if not Marvel, what else is there? And I looked at them and I said, self-respect. You know, like, I love Marvel, I love those characters, but it is not worth the hell that, you know, for me personally to work there. You know, some people are fine with that, and that's great. I hope they thrive there. But it was killing my joy, and we all get into these creative industries because we want to feed our joy, you know, and it's important to protect that. And you know, I don't want to be the curmudgeon-y, jaded old people, but I think at the end of the day, the industry does have a lot of learning to do. I think, you know, there definitely is an oversaturation of too many companies trying to be Image, you know, or too many companies trying to be Vertigo. Like, I mean, Image isn't even Image that they used to be.
Not anymore.
No, they're not. And it's because, you know, Boom also does creator owned, and Skybound and Dark Horse and Oni and IDW and
now we've got Distillery.
Exactly. You know, and I think the other thing too is on the creative front, yes, you should 100% be paid a living wage for doing a job, and you know, it is on the creator to advocate for themselves on that. But also, like, just because you want a job doesn't mean you're entitled to a job. You know, there are only one person can write Batman at a time. Only one person can draw Batman at a time. That's how that works, right? And just because I want to be, you know, #1 Billboard top selling singer doesn't mean I'm entitled to that. You know, I still have to work for that. And
that's for Taylor.
Yes, that is for Taylor. I'm coming for you, Taylor. But yeah, like, there's just a level, I think, of entitlement and immaturity, and just like, you have to be smart. You are your advocate. It's, you know, you do have to market yourself as a creator. There's more avenues than ever to put yourself out there to run your business, like Patreon, conventions, you know, other merch, other gigs, Kickstarter, right? Exactly. Substack, all of this stuff. Like, do I want to just sit in my hole and never have to talk to another human being or market or, you know, do anything, and just like create and have Walt Disney tap on my shoulder and be like, it's you're the one, here's $1 billion. That would be wonderful. That's not how the world works, you know? And so, you know, these are the rules of the game. I understand that I don't have the power myself to change the rules. But I can use my experience and wisdom to navigate that board game as best as I can, and, you know, pay it forward where I can, and use my platform where I can to advocate and change. And that's all any of us can do, you know. And I think it's just, you know, it is frustrating, but it's also, you have to do what's best for you. And yeah, that's all any of us can do. I don't know. It's not the most uplifting answer, but I think there's a lot of, you know, editors are evil and rolling in $1 billion, and like, that's not the case. Most of my day is like, how do I get my creators paid more? Like,
right.
And you know, I also like can't advocate for you as a creator if you aren't hitting your deadlines or answering my emails or you know.
Wow. Yeah, it's such a nuanced conversation.
It's so nuanced and complex, and I wish there was a simple solution of just more money and, you know, looking at you billionaires out there, Taylor Swift, fund comics. I don't know. Like,
right.
I don't know. Those private planes are
well. Let's not call on billionaires, because we saw what Elon Musk did to Twitter.
It's
so
fair.
maybe we want them out of comics.
That's fair.
But I'm glad you answered that. And first of all, you answered a lot of questions that I would have asked or I wanted to ask. So I'm glad you nailed them, and I'm glad you answered that in a nuanced way that addresses the reality of creating comics, not the ideal of creating comics. And I think that that's where a lot of people get caught up. I mean, Heidi McDonald, she got shouted down pretty bad from Comic Speak, for those of you who might not know. She got shouted down pretty bad on Twitter for essentially saying what you just said. And I know there are a lot of creators that don't want to hear it. We have creators in our community. And I think that what Heather just outlined is the heartbreaking reality for a creator. You have to earn your spot, and you have to advocate for yourself every single day in every way.
And I think, the thing that people like, so say a comic $3.99, right? That's your average comic is $3.99
at this point.
$4, right? I can't speak to like the PRH and Lunar, but back when like Diamond was Soule, monolith out there, 65 cents of every dollar was going to Diamond.
What?
Something like that, like some obscene high percentage was going to Diamond because they were monopoly and they could, right? So that's Diamond. Well, then you have your warehouse fees. Well, then you have your shipping fees. Well, then you have your printing fees. Well, then you have your production fees. Well, then you have your your internal fees, and then you have your creative costs, and then you have your licensors costs on top of that, and then you have profit.
Wow.
Right. And so I think I did some like very bare bones math of like, hypothetically, let's say we could pay every writer $100 per page, every artist, I think $350 for pencils and inks, every colorist, I think it was like $150, like just like, here's like, if you're making a good, not like top level Greg Capullo rates, but like, you can live off of this if you're doing 20 pages a month. I think just to sustain creative costs alone at those like nice, comfortable living, a comic would have to sell, I think it was like 12,000 copies, just for one issue, just for creative costs. And that's the reality. And so when you have companies, your distributors that are monopolizing the industry and really being greedy and everything on top of that, and like it's tough. It's really, really tough. And so there's no one good answer except buy comics, pre-order your comics. That's why those pre-orders matter. Like, right. That is why those pre-orders matter. So yeah.
Well, Heather, we want to respect your time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that answer.
We can't end on a downer. We have to.
Well, if that's how you feel, we do have a game that we wanted to play.
I will play a game.
Okay, that is absolutely perfect. So on this show, we like to end with a draft.
Oh, God.
And so all it is.
Never mind. I take it back.
We're just so I'll explain it. So what we're going to do today in this particular draft is, in honor of you being here and in honor of the work that you've done, we're going to be drafting a team of 4 science fiction heroes.
Okay.
And so the rules are simple. It's one character from a universe. So you can't pick like Darth Vader and Dr. Aphra. And
screw you, I can do what I want.
Well, you did have a hand in, putting it all together, so I guess you're right. And they have to be a character who would be on a spaceship, typically.
Okay.
So because Heather is the guest, I'm going to say that she gets to draft first. Okay. And for the rest of us, I will do the typical draft decider, which are my handy dandy dice. I'll go with my X-Men dice.
They're loaded dice, by the way.
They're not loaded, and it doesn't matter if they are because she's going first.
Fair. I'm just worried about me going last again.
That's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, refresh. It's a draft, best sci-fi characters. You get 4. You're
building a crew, right?
Building a crew.
Yeah. And they have to be characters you would typically see on a spaceship or a pilot.
Yeah, semantics.
Like okay. All right. If you guys are ready, I'm rolling my die now, and I'm rolling for Marco. Okay. So here we go. That is a 7.
Ooh, middle of the road.
I'm rolling for Tyler. That is an 8.
All right.
And for myself, that is a 6.
Okay.
So
Sean's last.
the order,
First time last?
yeah, I think this might be my first time going last. The order will be Heather, Tyler,
Yep.
Marco, and myself. And it'll be a snake draft. Tyler, you control that part.
Okay. Yep.
All right. So Heather up first.
Oh man. I'm gonna go. I don't know. This is tough. This is hard.
Atomic Count said Neil Armstrong.
Valid.
Then we get Buzz Aldrin. I'm gonna go with Data first.
Nice.
Okay.
Because if all else fails, Data can do everything himself. He can just plug into the ship and just run it himself.
That's true.
And I assume he comes with Spot as well.
He has to.
He has to,
I mean,
yeah.
you get Data so you can have Spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go Star Trek as well. And I need my boy Worf.
Oh, nice. Very good.
That's a good one.
It's just want to hear some guttural screaming in the hallways of my space deck. Yeah.
I'm going to deviate a little bit. I want to start with a captain. So I'm actually going to go Malcolm Reynolds, Firefly.
Hey, okay.
Oh,
Serenity,
cool.
baby.
Cool. All right. Well, you guys know me. I'm a Marvel lover, so
Yeah,
I'm going to kick things
You go
off
twice,
with.
Sean. Yeah.
Sorry.
You go twice, just so you know.
Right. I'm going to kick things off with Reed Richards,
Ooh, that's a good one.
Space. Okay.
and I'm going to go next with Luke Skywalker.
Oh, damn. Okay.
You went with Wormy.
Wormy. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what his bullies used to call him when he was a kid.
That's what they called him.
Yeah.
Come on, know your Star Wars fandom. Gosh.
You're right. Called out, fake fan.
I'm gonna do Sulu because he's one of my favorites.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Soule. Okay. Oh my. All right.
Wait, is it not Heather's turn?
No, I go and then Heather goes twice.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm gonna go with. Let me go Marvel, and I want Rocket Raccoon.
Ooh.
Good one.
That's a good one. Damn. He was on my list.
Oops.
All right. I'm going to go with get my pilot on. I'm going to use Ray. So we have someone who can fix shit and use the Force and pilot a ship.
There it is. And you got one more. And then
and I get one more after that. To Ray of Data. Get my muscle. I'm going to go with Groot since you got Rocket.
Fair.
Nice.
Fair. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's back to me. I don't have a. You know what? I'm gonna get a pilot. I'm gonna get Chewbacca. I have the
So
furriest
good.
group so far.
There we go. Pilot. I'll do a Porkins. I miss him.
Jack Porkins.
Yeah.
His piloting. Do you know what happened, Marco?
Hey, I'm aware. I'm aware.
Stay
Just
on
saying.
target.
Yeah.
He was one.
There's not to but my friend has a Ryan Brown commission of Jack Porkins, where Porkins is bigger than the X-wing that he's in. It's the funniest
Amazing.
commission I've ever seen. Yeah.
It's me, right?
Yeah, you
you
go
get two.
twice, and that's your crew, Sean.
Yep.
Cool. So that means I'm gonna choose Ripley from Alien,
Yeah. Okay.
and I'm gonna close it out with the robot from Lost in Space.
Oh, damn,
Specifically, the 1998 movie where my man was toting fucking guns. That's the version I want. Lasers and guns.
Okay. So Marco, I think it's your last one, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with. Oh damn. You know what? Give me Gamora. Want some more muscle? Need some athleticism there.
All right. I'm gonna finish off with Marco. Thank you for reminding me. I'm gonna go with Spike Spiegel.
Oh no! What a fool I was.
That's really funny because I'm going with Edward Wong Hao Peplu Taruski the Fourth.
There we go.
Well done.
Yeah.
Wait, can you repeat that?
Yeah, Edward Wong Hao Peplu Taruski the Fourth.
I only got 2 of those names, but that's okay. Hopefully, other people other than me know.
Marco knows.
I'm aware. Yep.
Marco knows.
Love Ed.
That's the best.
Okay, so those are our teams. So Heather got Data, Ray, Groot, and Edward.
Just
Wong.
say Ed.
Just
Ed.
It's just
Just say Ed.
Yeah. Tyler got Worf, Rocket Raccoon, Chewbacca, and Spike. Marco got Reynolds, Sulu, Porkins, and Gamora, and I got Reed Richards, Luke Skywalker, Rhea Ripley.
That's
Ripley and the robot from Lost in Space. So, audience, it's up to you. You guys let us know who you think won the draft. The qualification for what wins is whatever it is that you think, whoever it is you like the most. Maybe you picked Heather's because you like that dude's really long name. Whatever it is. Whatever's clever.
We gotta get you
And just know, if you don't pick me, I have the power to kill your favorite character in comics.
Oh, damn. that was a threat.
Well,
Same.
Spot's in danger. Oh no.
I'm just saying.
Well, hopefully that's the positive note.
Murdering comic book characters.
Yes. That's the positive note that the editor extraordinaire wants to end on, so we'll end on it. I want to remind you all that the Star Trek Day of Blood event is happening now. It's a 5-part crossover that's been fantastic so far. So if you want to check that out, just go to your local comic shop and buy the issues. Again, it's only 5 issues. So you can wrap this whole thing up with $20, and you'll get a lot of good storytelling for your buck. So pick that up. Yeah. Heather, is there anything that you want to plug or say to our listeners before you head out?
Just support your favorite comic creators and comic shops, and please, I know Amazon is very, very convenient, but buying from a local comic shop and pre-ordering from a local comic shop helps your creators more directly than Amazon ever could or will.
Absolutely. 100%. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it, Heather.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was fun.
We're going to quickly say goodbye off mic. So live listeners will be back in a moment. We'll see you then. And we're back. Thank you for hanging in there. That was a great interview, I thought. Really good conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I like getting to hear the other parts of comics that aren't, art and what's the other one? Writing with the words?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like writers and artists that we have on here are always going to come from a place of creative passion. They're always going to come from a place of like, this is what I love, and like I should be getting paid, for it fantastically, and all that other stuff, which is all great and true. But I like the sort of balance that Heather brought to it, where she's kind of like, yes, absolutely, but also think about the realities. And it's worth remembering that she's also a creative person. She's just the person who's forced to deal with the realities of the business that they're in more than the writer and artist, because she deals more with the higher ups. She receives those direct notes from the higher ups. So it makes a lot of sense. But it was cool to get to talk Star Wars comics with one of the people who spearheaded that whole initiative. That was my shit.
Yo, I love Vader Down. When she mentioned Vader Down, I was like, oh,
Vader Down. You got to scream that title, I think.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about that one because that, especially her coming out of like saying how the Star Trek stuff is going to be so just connected now. That book was, I thought, Star Wars and then Vader, they were like hand in hand.
Yeah.
Imagine working on Star Wars and Star Trek. Like, there's few people that can say they've worked on both as a property.
Her and J.J. Abrams.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the love in the chat. Sorry we weren't able to get to your questions. It's just that we knew we had a specific time limit, and you ask anybody one question, they give a 3-5 minute answer. It's like, okay, we can't, it's
also hopefully these people to come in on their off days at 10 o'clock in the morning. So like,
yeah, it's appreciated.
Exactly. Gotta be respectful of all that. And we weren't going to talk about the IDW originals thing. It's just like
it's not related.
There's no official report. Like IDW does not have an official I guess press release for that yet. So someone working for them will also not have one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So
but yeah, again, that was super fun. We're not gonna do a full show. Like, we're not gonna do news just because we wanted to make the focus of this the Heather interview, but I really, really appreciate everybody hanging out with us for it. Atomic Hound says that was an excellent interview, so exciteful and energizing. Thank you. Realistic about the issues facing our favorite storytelling form. Yeah, there are genuine issues that we are facing 100%. And on this podcast, we always talk about them. Like, this is those things that she was talking about are at the core of what we like to talk about on this show. So it's nice to have somebody on to have that kind of conversation and the insight to bring reality to it. And we'll have her on again. We'll have her on again.
Sure.
Yeah. Real quick though, how are you guys doing?
Little mental health check, Sean.
Yeah.
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I went to a swingers club last night. Which so I sent that to you guys in our Discord chat. It was just a mini golf thing called the Swingers Club. But I drop that bomb, I leave, I let them decipher for a bit, have fun like between themselves,
try to figure it out.
And then so hole in one on the first hole, downhill from there for me. But I love mini golf. Mini golf is like one of my favorite things. I grew up going to like the Jersey Shore as a kid, so that is built into my DNA. So whenever I get to putt around, I feel good after that. It's a good mental cleanse for me.
For sure.
Marco?
Hey man, I'm holding on.
You're hanging in there like that Spider-Man on the back of your fucking chair.
Yo, he's trying. Dude.
What's
he's
on
trying
his
real
nipple?
hard. Sorry?
What's on the spider nipple?
Oh, this is his Swamp Thing fan club
Oh my God.
badge. It comes with his own membership card as well, which he has. So
Oh my god.
because he's a huge Swamp Thing fan. For those of you who didn't know, actually.
I can't believe you actually have that. Like, he actually pulled out a thing of Swamp Thing membership cards.
I have two actually, because I've participated in quite a few fanzines, or like I've bought a few fanzines and whatnot. So I have my own. I have two membership. One is for me, one is for him.
Out there exposing your muck hole like that.
I'm sorry.
What?
What's that?
Wow. I'm good. I'm energized by the conversation that we just had. We had to do a little bit of firefighting in the chat, but that's par for the course when you do this kind of thing.
God forbid you have a woman on a comic book podcast. Jeez.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny how that works. But anyway, we're gonna get out of here. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As a reminder, of course, if you enjoyed that conversation, if you enjoy what we do on a week-to-week basis, patreon.com/thecomicspals is the absolute best way to show your support, show your love. We show you love right back by putting out what I believe to be some awesome content on the Patreon side of things. It's never required, but if you enjoy what we do and you want us to continue to do it and be able to continue to support this endeavor, then that's the best way to do it. We give you the book club poll, which you get every month. What's the next book club we're doing? Invasion. Right.
Invasion. Yes.
Invasion. That'll be out Tuesday, September 5th. So you guys will be able to check out our conversation about DC's Invasion, not the Secret Invasion. DC's Invasion. You get a nickname and a shout out, which you guys heard earlier. You get our newsletter, you get palling around, you get a lot of cool stuff. So check that out, patreon.com/thecomicspals. If you want to watch this show live, that is every single Saturday at 10:15 a.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Eastern for Pals Polls. We did move the listener pick poll to YouTube. So in the community tab, you can find the listener pick poll. Honestly, it's probably going to stay there because it's already eclipsing the Twitter poll. So it's probably going to stay there. So from now on, if you want to vote, that's the place to do it. Join our Discord server. Always having fun there. It's a great time. Love to have you guys on board with us for that. And for everything else, at the Comics Pals. Let's hit the plugs. Marco.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Comics Pals, and this one with Heather Antos. So thank you guys for the support. It helps to make a lot of these things possible. We get a bit more visibility, we get a bit more access, and so yeah, it's been super helpful, and thank you guys. Otherwise, come talk to me at Mr. Marco Enomoto on Instagram, Twitter. That's it for now.
We're currently getting our notifications lit up by a certain group of people, so that's fun. Tyler, go ahead.
You can follow me at the Tyler Olson on Instagram, X. Oh, I got to update the icon up there. Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
What am I on? I'm on TikTok. Follow us on TikTok, the Comics Pals. I'm on Threads. I'm on Blue Sky now. I have way too much social media because none of it's centralized. That we haven't as a collective consciousness found a spot yet. So it's a bit of a diaspora social media wise right now. But I just want to say thanks to the people in the chat that were enthusiastic about stuff. So I appreciate that. I love seeing that, with actual questions. So yeah, that was fun. Talk to me about Baldur's Gate. Got to me on Discord. I'm there in the video games channel of our Discord, like by myself. Come on, people. I'm like talking to a void, which I've already seen people do today. So I would rather you talk to me on the video games channel. That'd be great.
Well, if you were talking about something that I could engage you in, I cannot engage you in Baldur's.
Oh, don't talk to me about engaging. Oh. We'll keep it to Star Trek.
As for me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram only, or X and Instagram only.
Saying X is the worst.
I know, it's bizarre.
It's like follow me on Pornhub. Like, what are we doing here?
What?
What?
I'm just
monetization,
I'm
Tyler.
It sounds like it.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We thank you. We love you. We're the Comic